Right, third time's a charm, everybody. Mrs. P got a little bit grumpy yesterday because she couldn't get her machine to work. And so, dear Bella, bless her, is videoing me with her special camera. So, before our Kahoot starts at 5 o'clock, I thought we would have a go at reading our wonderful BFG. So here we go. The BFG had intended to whisk Sophie off the table as soon as he got the chance and hide her behind his back. But now there was no hope of doing this. Sophie peered around the chewed-off end of the enormous schnozcumber, watching the two giants as they moved away down the cave. The blood bottler was a gruesome sight. His skin was reddish pink. There was black hair sprouting on his chest and arms and on his stomach. The hair on his head was long and dark and tangled. His foul face was round and squashy looking. The eyes were tiny black holes, and the nose was small, but the mouth was huge. It spread right across the face, almost ear to ear, and it had lips that were like two gigantic purple frankfurters lying one on top of each other. Craggy yellow teeth stuck out between the two purple frankfurter lips, and rivers of spit ran down over the chin. How revolting. It was not in the least difficult to believe that this ghastly brute ate men, women, and children every night. The blood bottler, still holding the BFG by the arm, was examining the rows and rows of bottles. "You and your pibbling bottles!" he shouted. "What is you putting in them?" "Nothing that would interest you," the BFG answered. "You is only interested in guzzling human beings." "And you as dotty as a dog's wallah," said the blood bottler. Soon the blood bottler would be coming back, and Sophie told herself, and he was bound to search the tabletop, but she couldn't possibly jump off the table. It was 12 feet high. She'd break a leg. The schnozcumber, although it was as thick as a perambulator, was not going to hide her if the blood bottler picked it up. She examined the chewed-off end. It had large seeds in the middle, each one as big as a melon. They were embedded in soft, slimy stuff. Taking care to stay out of sight, Sophie reached forward and scooped away 6 of these seeds. This left a hole in the middle of the schnozcumber, large enough for her to crouch in so long as she rolled herself up into a tiny little ball. She crawled into it. It was wet and slimy and not a particularly nice hiding place. But what did that matter if it was going to save her from being eaten? The blood bottler and the BFG were coming back towards the table now. The BFG was nearly fainting with fear. Any moment he was telling himself Sophie would be discovered and gobbled up. Suddenly, the blood bottler grabbed the half-eaten schnozcumber. The BFG just stared at the bare table. "Sophie, where is you?" he thought desperately. You not possibly be jumping off the high table, so where is you hiding, Sophie?" he was thinking. "So this is the filthy, rotsome glumblage you was eating," boomed the blood bottler, holding up the partly eaten schnozcumber. "You must be cockles to be guzzling such a rub squash." For a moment, the blood bottler seemed to have forgotten about his search for Sophie. The BFG decided to lead him further off the track. "That is a scrumdiddly-umptious schnozcumber," he said. "It is guzzling it gleefully every night, I is, and every day. Is you never trying a schnozcumber, blood bottler?" "Human beans is juicier," the blood bottler said. "You is talking rommy tot," the BFG said, growing braver by the second. He was thinking that if only he could get the blood bottler to take one bite of the repulsive vegetable, the sheer foulness of its flavour would send him bellowing out of the cave. "I is happy to let you sample it," the BFG went on. But please, when you see how truly glumptious it is, do not be guzzling the whole thing. Leave me a snitchet for my supper. The blood butler stared suspiciously with small piggy eyes at the snozzcumber. Sophie, crouching inside the chewed-off end, began to tremble all over. "You is not switch-fiddling me, is you?" said the blood butler. "Never. Me? Never. Take a bite. I am positive you will be shouting out, 'Oh, how scrum-diddly-umptious this wonder veg is!'" The BFG could see the greedy blood bottler's mouth beginning to water more than ever at the prospect of extra food. "Vegetables is very good for you," he went on. "It is not healthsome always to be eating meaty things like human beings." "Oh, just this once," the blood bottler said. "I is going to taste these rotten eats of yours. But I is warning you that if it is filthsome, I is smashing it over your sludgy little head." And with that, he picked up the snozzcumber. He began raising it on his long journey to his mouth, some 50 feet up in the air. Sophie wanted to scream, "Don't!" but that would have been an even more certain death. Crouching among the slimy seeds, she felt herself being lifted up and up and up, and suddenly there was a crunch as the blood bottler bit a huge hunk off the end. Sophie saw his yellow teeth clamping together a few inches from her head. Then there was utter darkness. She was in his mouth. She caught a whiff of his evil-smelling breath. It stank of bad meat. She waited for the teeth to go crunch once more, and she prayed that she might be killed quickly. "Yak!" roared the blood bottler. "Yak!" And then he spat. All of the great lumps of snozzcumber that were in his mouth, as well as Sophie herself, went shooting out across the cave. If Sophie had struck the stony wall of the cave, she most certainly would have been killed. Instead, she hit the soft folds of the BFG's black coat hanging against the wall. She dropped to the ground half stunned, and she crawled under the hem of the cloak, and there she crouched. "You little swine bungler!" roared the blood brother. "You little pig's willer!" He rushed at the BFG and smashed what was left of the snozzcumber over his head, and fragments of the filthy vegetable splashed all over the cave. "You is not loving it?" the BFG asked innocently, rubbing his head. "Loving it?" yelled the blood bottler. "That is the most disgustorous taste that is ever clutching my teeth. You must be bunglers to be squalloping slutch like that. Every night you could be galloping off happy as a hamburger and gobbling juicy human beans." "But eating human beans is wrong and evil," the BFG said. "It is guzzling and glumptuous," shouted the blood bottler. "And tonight I is galloping off to Chile to swabble a few human Chile beans. Is you wishing to know why I is choosing Chile?" "I is not wishing to know anything," the BFG said, very dignified. "I is choosing Chile because I is fed up with the taste of Esquimos. It is important I has plenty of cold eats in the scuddling hot weather, and the next coldest thing to an Esquimo is a chili bean. Human beans from Chile is very chilly." "Horrible! You ought to be ashamed," said the BFG. "Other giants is saying they is wanting to gallop off to England tonight to guzzle school childers. I is very fond indeed of English school childers. They have nice inky booky flavour. Perhaps I will change my mind and go to England with them." "You is disgusting," the BFG said. "And you is an insult to the giant peoples," shouted the blood bottler. "You is not fit to be a giant. You is squinky little squiddler. You is piddling little pitsqueak. You is a cream puffnut." With that, the horrible blood-bottling giant strode out of the cave. The BFG ran to the cave entrance and quickly rolled the stone back in place. Sophie, where is you, Sophie?" And Sophie emerged from under the hem of the black cloak. "I'm here," she said. The BFG picked her up and held her tenderly in the palm of his hand. "Oh, I is so happy to be finding you all in one lump," he said. "It was awful. I was actually in his mouth," Sophie said. "You was what?" cried the BFG. Sophie told him what had happened. "And there I was telling him to eat the filthsome snozzcumber, and you was all the time inside it?" the BFG cried. "I can tell you, BFG, it wasn't much fun." "Just look at you, you poor little childer," cried the BFG. "You is a covered in snozzcumber and giant spit." He set about cleaning her up as best he could. "I is hating those giants more than ever now," he said. "You know what I should like?" "What is that, Sophie asked. "I should like to find a way of disappearing them, every single one." "Well, I'd be very glad to help you," Sophie said. "Let me see if I can think of a way of doing it." So the next chapter is called Frobscottle and Whiz-Poppers. So I wonder what a Frobscottle and a Whiz-Popper is. So my little Zoomers, I hope you enjoyed that. I promise I will post another one tomorrow, and I will continue posting them over the holidays until we get our wonderful BFG finished. So I look forward to seeing you at 5 o'clock. Mwah.